We have a story coming up written by the writer Eric Roach, who is from a writer from Tobago. This story is called Match in Blood, and it is going to be read by the lovely Alicia Haynes, Auntie Alicia, and here she is.
Yes,
Good
she
evening.
is. And you see, I have all my grass behind me.
My
I'm getting
grass
ready for the match.
Lovely, lovely.
Ah,
Welcome.
thank you, darling. Good afternoon, everybody. So, match in blood. Harry spun his off break a little outside off stump, and as it bit and turned on the dirt wicket, the swiper's flailing bat slammed into the spin. We watched the ball zoom high and arc over to where Wang Yu was fielding at long on. Wang Yu dropped the ball. Harry collapsed and sat on the grass with his shock of heavy black hair between his knees while Swiper and the other batsman ran a single. Wang Yu threw in the ball to our wicketkeeper Sanchez, and it was the end of Harry's over. Boy, we lost the match. Doku, our captain, moaned. I felt so too. The swiper was our opponent's last real batsman, and we had to set him up for the kill. If Wang Yu hadn't dropped him, our school, St. Jude's, had the match and the trophy. We were playing the final match for the schools in our county. When Wang Yu reached the wicket, Tony said, "But Wang Yu, you're like an Englishman boy. You can't even catch a cold in winter." Wang Yu did not answer. His narrow Chinese Creole eyes blinked quickly at Tony, like when he was very angry. Then he went to his place on the field. "Come on, play the game," Sir said from the umpire's position at square leg. "Win or lose, play the game. Put someone else to bowl." Harry got up from the grass, still angry with Wang Yu for dropping the catch. "Put on Miss Yuli," he said quietly, so that Sir could not hear. Miss Yuli was Wang Yu's sister. She had recently come from training college and joined the staff at St. Jude's, and Sir was so much in love with her, he started daydreaming in front of the class, a thing he never did before. Since then, Wang Yu, whose real name was Tom Yu Lee, was like Sir's baby brother. "Go and bowl, Randy," Ducko told me. "Set the field as you want it." That was something to think about. The swiper was our last obstacle. With 7 wickets down and 84 runs on the board against the 96 we had made, he could win the match for his side in a couple of hits. All he had to do was to swing his cutlass bat and slaughter me. But if I went round the wicket and sent it between the pad and his swinging bat, giving his swing less opportunity to strike, I might get him that way. I told Doc so, and he agreed. He, Harry, and the Joker Tony went into slips. He tightened the field and called on everybody to look sharp. My first ball was aimed straight at the swiper's body. He stepped into the wicket and let it run past the wicket and past Sanchez far by. The other batsman was a Dogla boy called Roy, who batted well. But unfortunately for him, the second ball, faster and on length, hit a rough spot and reared up awkwardly. Poor Roy took fright and jerked the bat up in front of his face. The ball struck it high up near the bat handle, and Harry took a very easy catch. "One gone, 2 more to go," Tony the Joker sang out, Calypso fashion. The other sir called out to our sir and told him I was bowling bouncers. Sir told him I didn't look like any Griffith, and as he could see, but it was the state of the wicket. But the other sir, alarmed now that his team might lose the match, decided to caution me himself. He said, "Look, West Hall, take it easy before you kill somebody, eh?" Harry heard him and said very loudly for everyone to hear, "Like this man born in India, yes? They don't have fast bowlers there. He calling slow bowling fast." "Cut that out, Harry Charan," our sir called out loudly. "None of that now." Tony was laughing his head off because the other sir was an Indian like Harry. Tony could see a joke in anything. The other batsman came in. I had 4 balls to go to bowl. I told myself if I could bowl a hat trick, I wouldn't have to meet the swiper again, and we would win the match easily. I was daydreaming. The new batsman, an Indian like Harry, glided his first ball sweetly to leg, and they took a single, bringing the swiper to face me again. It was 87 for 8. The new batsman, an Indian like Harry, oh, forgive me, I'm repeating. It was 87 for 8, only 10 runs to win. He could do it in 2 swipes. I aimed the ball close to his leg, and thank heavens, dead on the length. He brought the bat over and blocked in a very comical way. Tony laughed and said, "Boy, that is a Watusi stroke." "You keep him at that, Randy," shouted Ducko, encouraging me. The swiper blocked the next 2 in his Watusi way. He understood his danger. I was so dead on that he curved his cutlass swipe. He would be bowled. At the end of the over, he glared at me like an angry animal. I was denying him his personal enjoyment of swiping big hits and threatening to take the match away from his school. Ducko took the next over at the other end, bowling his natural in-swingers very fast. The batsman got a snick and it tore through the slips, and they got 2 more. 8 runs to win and 2 wickets to fall. "Match in blood!" Harry sang out desperately. Ducko tried to be more careful, but the next one went to leg, and they took a fast single to bring the swiper back to face the bowling. Our captain's blood was up. He was excited and angry at the possibility of our losing the match. He aimed a terribly fast ball straight at the swiper's body. The boy pulled back from the wicket hurriedly, and although the ball struck Sanchez's glove, they were still able to take a bye. The other sir walked to the center of the wicket and told our sir, "Look, man, this is bad business. We'd better caution this Wild West gang you have here. They have gone berserk." Harry never gave our sir a chance to answer. He yelled out, "Match in blood! Play the game, St. Jude's, play the game! We're bound to beat them." Sir said quietly, "Look, you chaps, play it cool. Play it cool. It's only a game of cricket." "It's a game to win," Harry shouted. "Play the game." There was the swiper facing me again with 6 runs to win and 2 wickets to fall. I felt the game was now on my shoulders. Wang Yu, crossing the pitch, came up and put his arm around me. He was our best batsman. He said quietly, "Keep it on the length and aim for his leg. Stump, aim for the leg stump. No big thing." No big thing indeed. 1 clout now from the swiper, and it was all over. "Bowl the man down!" Harry shouted. "Bowl him down!" The whole team shouted in chorus. It was like a battle cry. I wiped my hand in the dirt to get off the sweat and turned to face the swiper. He was glaring at me. He and I were equally desperate. As I ran up, he backed away from the stumps, giving himself room to swing. He made contact and the ball flew to mid-on. He started to run. They took one. They turned to take two, but Wang Yu had the ball and sent it back straight to me at the stumps. The batsman was out by yards, but not the swiper. He was safe at the other end. They had a run, but lost a wicket. So it was now 4 to win and the last wicket to fall. Our team crowded around the wicket and everyone was saying, "We're going to beat them! We're going to beat them!" And cautioning me, "All good, Randy. All good. Don't make the swiper hit you at all." Easier said than done. "Come on, play the game, boys," Sir said as the last batsman reached the wicket. He was a little thin lad, and Tony the Joker called him the runt. He ran close up to him and said, "But boy, you small so. You think you could play cricket with big men like me? We're going to eat you like a tiger." This poor little fellow jumped nervously, and Tony took his place in the field, laughing heartily. To me, the swiper now looked bigger and fiercer in his desperation to get the last 4 runs. I felt equally fierce in my determination to win this game so nearly in their grasp and ours. He didn't back away again. He played his funny rounded arm with Tusi block, and I felt he was waiting for the right one to heave his mighty swipe and finish the game. I could see he didn't want to give the run to strike or for him to get run out again. It was all or nothing at all this time. I sensed that was what he was thinking. When I was about to bowl the 5th ball of the over, I knew that was one he intended to hit. He crouched down grimly over the bat like a fierce animal waiting to spring. I ran to the wicket and bowled in the usual way, but holding it back, cutting the speed. The swiper never suspected. When he had finished swiping, the wind for 6 with a fierce swing that dragged his foot out of the crease. The ball was in Sanchez's gloves. The wicketkeeper laughed gleefully and stumped him. The end.
Now, each week we have Mr. Mutilal Budu Singh, who is also a writer of original content. And Mr. Budu Singh has 2 books, Kal Kahanis, Stories of Yesteryear, and Chata Kahanis, Spicy Stories of Yesteryear. And every week, Mr. Budu Singh comes with a story just suitable for our theme. And we want to say a special thank you to Mr. Budu Singh for joining us every Monday evening. We are so happy to have you here with us. Good evening, Mr. Budu Singh.
Good evening, Anna. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. And Mr. Budu Singh's story this evening is Bhumi Puja, and in brackets he put Mother Earth. So Bhumi, Mother Earth Puja. Yes, Mr. Budu Singh?
Thank you. I wrote this especially for this session.
Wonderful, thanks. Go right ahead.
Bhumi Puja. Tim Singh and his wife Raju had been renting 2 small rooms from Masai since they were married 3 years ago. He could not go back to his father's home in Bhagarati Trace because he had refused to marry Carmen as his father had arranged, instead choosing Raju, whom he met while working at the Bakal Bus Company. There was no traditional 3-day Hindu wedding, as his father, stung by his defiance, put him out, saying, "If he can't listen to me, let you find your own place. Big man must paddle their own canoe." Rather, he had a warden of his wedding, with Mr. Rat substituting as his father, who refused to attend, and Raju two brothers, her parents having passed away a long while ago. He wished to have his own home and had long given up hope of inheriting a piece of land from his father, who showed no signs of mending relations. Even after the two children were born, his mother visited, but not his father. He had since left the job at Bakal Bus Company and first worked with an English company doing seismic surveys looking for oil in the forested areas. A strong man, he would carry the equipment as they ventured deeper in the wooded territory. His pay was much better, and Bhim Singh was saving to buy his own land. Raju continued her sewing and had by now bought her own machine from the Singer Sewing Company, paying $5 a month in installments. She had also started giving young girls who had just left school sewing lessons and was also contributing to what they call their land fund. They needed a bigger place with the two children and the sewing classes. Next, they rented a lot of land from Masai and built a little house of karat and wood with 2 rooms, a small kitchen, and a bigger area for the sewing classes. Masan had promised to sell them the lot when she had permission for subdividing. When the government surveyors came to locate the penal government school, Bhim and Raju realized that they were paying rent for state lands. They were told they had to move in 1 year when construction would begin. At that time, Bob was planning a wedding for his daughter Doolin. In order to have a big wedding, he was selling a piece of land in Gopi Trace. With their savings, the first and last hand drawn from the village Susu, and a loan from Barclays Bank Pinal, the couple was able to buy the land. When the seismic work ended, Bim got a back pay. He bought a second-hand Zephyr car and began working as a taxi driver. Whenever he and Raju had extra money, he would buy board, beams, and even galvanize and store in a shed he had built on the land in preparation for building their new home. While Bim worked at driving taxi, the running of the house was left to his wife. Groceries, market, children care were all left to Raju. She made the arrangements for prayers as well as celebrating the various religious observances. Although he had grown up in a Hindu home, even schooled in the Ramayana by his uncle Gudar, Bhim Singh seemed to have fallen back from the prayerful practices of his youth. He no longer made offerings at his jandi on mornings and often complained about the number of holy rites in the Hindu calendar. Nearly every time his fasting, he would grumble, as Raju would insist on a diet of no meat and fish, or fish when it was Diwali, Ram Navami, Phagwa, Kartik, Shivratri, or other religious days. Puja would mean 14 days fasting, and Bim felt that this was not necessary. Even when they had prayers and she wanted 3 chandis, he said one was enough. After a while, he stopped accompanying her when she sat down for puja, saying that someone should be free to welcome and serve the guests. Even when they attended prayers at relatives, Bim Singh and the other men would go to the wrong shop, only returning when food was being served. Now the earth, Dharati Mata, is seen as a goddess for Hindus and deserves devotion and protection. Many Hindu rituals recognize that human beings benefit from the earth and offer gratitude and protection in return. Hindus touch the floor when getting out of bed each morning and before entering temples as a means of asking Mother Earth to forgive them for trampling on her body. The earthen bedi is a must at all Hindu pujas. When they wanted to start building, Raju insisted that they perform Bhumi Puja, which was the tradition of offering prayers to the Almighty Mother Earth and the other forces of nature before starting construction. The Bhumi Puja is also done to seek forgiveness for living things that take shelter underground. One may unknowingly harm them during construction works, or they may get displaced because of it. The Bhumi Puja is also done to seek the blessings of Lord Ganesha and the other gods to ensure that the work takes place uninterrupted and runs smoothly after it begins. The Pandit was consulted, and a suitable date and spot was identified to put down the first post. As head of the family, Bhim Singh was entrusted with this function, but Bhim Singh half-heartedly participated, merely going through the motions. When the puja was completed, Bhim Singh began digging the hole for planting the first post. He reached a few feet when he struck his big toe with the fork and began to bleed heavily. All work stopped as he made his way to the San Fernando casualty. When he returned in the evening, the hole was filled with water that had seeped from underground, thus preventing the planting of the pillar. Later that night, in pain and with remorse, he confessed to Raju that he did not pay proper respect when the Bhumi Puja was being done. That night, Raju prayed to Mother Earth as Dharti Mata for forgiveness for her husband. She decided that she will conduct the Bhumi Puja the next day. The water abated and the pillar was planted. Bhim Singh began to show more respect to the rituals and practices of his religion. The house was completed and stands to this day, 60 years later. Raju and Bhim had since passed away, and their daughter Shanti now lives there with her family, maintaining the house that her parents built and the mango tree that they planted. Thank you.
Now we would hear the Quarrel of the Quails from Auntie Leslie-Ann. Hi,
Hi,
welcome.
glad to be here.
Yes, so the Quarrel of the Quails, a Jakarta Tales, retold by Ellen C. Babbitt and
Yes,
read for us by Leslie-Ann Beckles this evening. Go right ahead.
sure. Once upon a time, many quails lived together in a forest. The wisest of them all was their leader. A man lived near the forest and earned his living by catching quails and selling them. Day after day, he listened to the note of the leader calling the quails. By and by, this man, the fowler, was able to call the quails together. Hearing the note, the quails thought it was their leader who called. When they were crowded together, the fowler threw his net over them and off he went into the town, where he soon sold all the quails that he had caught. The wise leader saw the plan of the fowler for catching the quails. He called the birds to him and said, "This fowler is carrying away so many of us. We must put a stop to it. I have thought of a plan. It is this. Next time the fowler throws a net over you, each of you put your head through one of the little holes in the net. Then all of you together must fly away to the nearest thorn bush. You can leave the net on the thorn bush and be free yourself." The quails said that was a very good plan, and they would try it next time the fowler threw the net over them. The very next day, the fowler came and called them together. Then he threw the net over them. The quails lifted the net and flew away with it to the nearest thorn bush where they left it. They flew back to their leader to tell him how well his plan had worked. The fowler was busy until evening getting his net off the thorns, and he went home empty-handed. The next day, the same thing happened, and the next. His wife was angry because he did not bring home any money, but the fowler said, "The fact is those quails are working together now. The moment my net is over them, off they fly with it, leaving it on the thorn bush. As soon as the quails begin to quarrel, I shall be able to catch them." Not long after, one of the quails in alighting on their feeding ground trod on accident on another's head. "Who trod on my head?" angrily cried the second. "I did, but I didn't mean to. Don't be angry," said the first quail, but the second quail was angry and said mean things. Soon all the quails had taken sides in this quarrel. When the fowler came that day, he flung his net over them, and this time, instead of flying off with it, one side said, "Now you lift the net," and the other side, "Lift it yourself. You try to make us lift it at all," said the quails on one side. "No, we don't," said the others. "You begin and we will help." But neither side began. So the quails quarreled, and while they were quarreling, the fowler caught them all in his net. He took them down to town and sold them for a good price. The end.
I would now read a story. It's a Japanese folk tale by Matsuo Basho, The Aged Mother. Once upon a time, there lived at the bottom of a mountain a poor farmer and his elderly widowed mother. They owned a little bit of land that supplied them with food. The man and his mother were peaceful, humble, and happy. The nearby town of Shining was ruled by a hateful ruler. He was a powerful warrior, but he had one great fear. He was terrified of growing old and losing his strength. He didn't even want to be reminded of getting old by seeing the elderly. As a result, he sent out a terrible order. The whole area was told to put all the old people to death. This order led to terrible times. Many people simply abandoned their old people to die. The poor farmer who lived at the bottom of the mountain was very upset. He dearly loved his mother, and the order caused him great pain. But no one had ever dared to disobey the order of the wicked ruler. So he tried to find the kindest way to put his mother to death. At the end of the day, with his work completed, the farmer took some unwhitened rice. This was the main food for people like him and his mother. He cooked it, dried it, and tied it up in a square cloth. He then swung it in a bundle over his shoulder, along with a pitcher filled with cool water. Next, he lifted his mother onto his back and began to climb the mountain. The trail up the mountain was long and steep. It was crossed and recrossed by many paths made by hunters and woodcutters. At some points, they got lost and confused, but the farmer didn't care. He just kept climbing upwards towards the top of the mountain. This area was known as Obatsuyama, which means abandoning of the aged. The man's mother, traveling on her son's back, noticed that he was unsure where he was going. He was wandering from one path to another. She was worried that he would get into trouble on his way back down. So As they traveled, she reached out her hand and snapped branch twigs. She dropped a handful every few steps to show the way back. Finally, they got to the top of the mountain. The man was tired, but he was also heartbroken at the thought of abandoning his mother. He put down the rice and water and prepared a comfortable place for his mother. He made a soft bed out of fallen pine needles and gently placed his mother upon it. The man wrapped his mother's padded coat around her shoulders. Then, with tears in his eyes and pain in his heart, he said goodbye. The old mother gave a last piece of advice to her son. Her voice was trembling with unselfish love. She said, "My son, do not let your eyes be blinded. The mountain road is full of dangers. Look carefully and follow the path with piles of twigs on it. They will guide you back to the path you know lower down the mountain." The son looked back over the path and was surprised to see the piles of twigs. Then he looked down at the poor, old, shriveled hands of his mother. They were scratched and dirty because of the loving work she had done for him. He bowed down to give her honor and, with his heart breaking, said, "Oh, dear mother, your kindness breaks my heart. I will not leave you. Together we will follow the paths of the twigs, and together we will die." Once again, he put his mother on his back and set off down the mountain. The weight seemed light to him now, and he was able to make it through the shadows and the moonlight down to their little hut. Under the kitchen floor was a hidden basement where food was stored. The son hid his mother in there. He made sure she had all the food that she needed, but he was always worried that she would be discovered. Time passed and the son began to feel safe again. But then the ruler sent out another order. This one was extremely unreasonable. He wanted his people to give him a gift of a rope made of ashes. Everyone was in fear. The order had to be obeyed, yet no one in all of Shining knew how to make a rope of ashes. Then, one night, the son told his mother about the new order from the ruler. Then his mother spoke up. "Wait," she said. "I will think. I will think." After 2 days of thinking, she told him what to do. "Make a rope of twisted straw," she said. "Then stretch it upon a row of flat stones and burn it on a windless night." The son called the people together. They worked together to do just as his mother had said. When the fire died down, lying upon the stones was a perfectly shaped rope of ashes. When the ruler came down, he was very pleased at the cleverness of the farmer and gave him lots of praise. But he also demanded to know where the man's wisdom had come from. The farmer cried out, "I cannot lie." Then he went down to tell the ruler his story. The ruler listened carefully, then thought for a long time. He lifted his head and said, "Shining needs more than strength and youth. I forgot the old saying. With the crown of snow there comes wisdom." Immediately, the terrible law was abolished and the custom drifted far into the past, and now only the legend remains. The end. This story is a Japanese folktale, The Aged Mother by Matsuo Basho. Our first reading this evening will be done by Auntie Leslie-Ann, and this is a short story, an extract, The Prophet is Born. It's about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and is written by Leila Azam and Aisha Gouverneur. Good evening, Auntie Leslie-Ann.
Good evening.
Let me spotlight you. Where are you? Are we seeing you? And there you are. Welcome.
Ramadan
Go right
Mubarak.
ahead there.
The Prophet is born. One day, while traveling north, one of the Arab tribes from Mecca met a hermit in the desert. Some of the men stopped to speak with him. Hermits were known to be wise, and the Arabs often asked their advice. The hermits asked where they had come from. When they replied that they were from Mecca, he told them that Allah would soon send a prophet who would come from their people. They asked the name of this prophet, and the hermit answered, and his name would be Muhammad, and that he would guide them to a new way of life. Meanwhile, in Mecca, Amina, although saddened by the loss of her husband, felt especially well and strong as she awaited the birth of her baby. During this time, she dreamt of many things. On one occasion, it was as if a great light was shining out of her. And on another, she heard a voice telling her that she would have a boy and that his name would be Muhammad. She never forgot that voice, but she told no one about it. On Monday, the 12th day of Rabi al-Awwal, in the year of the elephant, Amina gave birth to a son. Allah sends many, many signs when one of his chosen prophets is born. And on the 12th day of Rabi al-Awwal in the year of 570 AD, many such signs were seen. Some were seen by Jewish scholars who had read in their scriptures of their coming prophets. One of these learned men in Yathrib, for instance, saw a brilliant new star he had never seen before as he studied the heavens that night. He called the people around him and pointing the star out to them, told them a prophet must have been born. That same night, another Jew was passing by the meeting place of the leaders of Quraysh in Mecca. He asked them if a baby boy had been born and told them that if it were true, this would be the prophet of the Arab nation. Amina sent news of the birth to her father-in-law, Abd al-Muttalib, who was sitting near to the kebab at the time. He was very happy and began at once to think of a name for the boy. An ordinary name would not do. 6 days came and went, and still he had not decided. But on the 7th day, as he lay asleep near the Kaaba, Abd al-Muttalib dreamt that he should give the baby the unusual name of Muhammad, just as Amina herself had dreamt. And the child was called Muhammad, peace be upon him, which means the praised one. When Abd al-Muttalib told the leaders of Quraysh what he had named his grandson, many of them asked, "Why did you not choose the sort of name that is used by our people?" At once he replied, "I want him to be praised by Allah in the heavens and praised by men on earth."
The Bees and Wasps and the Hornet, an Aesop's Fable. A store of honey had been found in a hollow tree, and the wasp declared positively that it belonged to them. The bees were just as sure that the treasure was theirs. The argument grew very pointed, and it looked as if the affair could not be settled without a battle. When at last, with much good sense, they agreed to let a judge decide the matter. So they brought the case before the Hornet, justice of the peace, in that part of the woods. When the judge called the case, witnesses declared that they had seen certain winged creatures in the neighborhood of the hollow tree who hummed loudly and whose bodies were striped yellow and black, like bees. Counsel for the Wasps immediately insisted that this description fitted his clients exactly. Such evidence did not help Judge Hornet to any decision, so he adjourned court for 6 weeks to give him time to think it over. When the case came up again, both sides had a large number of witnesses. An aunt was first to take the stand and was about to be cross examined when a wise old bee addressed the court. Your Honor, he said, the case has now been pending for 6 weeks. If it is not decided soon, the honey will not be fit for anything. I move that the bees and the wasps be both instructed to build a honeycomb. Then we shall soon see who the honey really belongs. The wasp protested loudly. Wise Judge Hornet quickly understood why they did so. They knew they could not build a honeycomb and fill it with honey. It is clear, said the judge, who made the comb and who could not have made it. The honey belongs to the bees. The moral of the story: ability proves itself by deeds. And that is the story of the bees. And now we are going to hear from Mrs. Heather Lalto Ferguson. Mrs. Ferguson is a penal Trini living in Canada for over 50 years, and she is going to read for us A Return to India, which was written by her. So it's written by her, and it's going to be read by her this evening on virtual Storytime. Welcome, Mrs. Lalto Ferguson. So you have to turn on your video so that we can see who you
Here
are.
I am.
There you are. Hi, welcome, and thank you for being with us this evening. Go right ahead with your story.
Thank you very much for that wonderful, warm welcome. This is my first time here, and I'm just going to read. This was published on the My Trinidad magazine recently, but because we're celebrating Indian Arrival Day, I thought I would share it with your group. Here we go, A Return to India. On the 3rd of May, 1881, the ship SS Foyle of England hugged the north coast of Trinidad, slipped in through the Bocas, and arrived at the Port of Spain wharf bearing human cargo. She had left the port of Calcutta in India months earlier, traversing the unyielding ocean to bring indentured workers to Trinidad to work on the sugar and cocoa plantations for the wealth and ease of the higher-ups of the empire. Packed like sardines in the bowels of the wooden craft, the tired, hungry people disembarked in a strange new land. Among them was a small family consisting of a father named Sabsu, mother Gonasi, and their young son Laltu. This is how my fraternal family came to Trinidad. This family was recruited by the British government in India in response to the continued need for cheap labor on the world market once slavery had been abolished. Promised a pittance for their labor as well as an eventual return to India with the wealth to match those of the Rajas, many poor people were prompted to take up the offer to make a better life for themselves. Mired in the caste system which forbade upward mobility, my grandfather Sabsu of the Chamara caste could not see past his lowly state as a cart driver in the village of Farrukhabad in Uttar Pradesh, so he jumped at a chance to better his lot in life. Bearing just the clothes on their backs, their only possessions consisted of a full regalia of silver jewelry worn by Gunasi, in accordance with what the women of India of that era customarily wore. Also, Sabsu brought a small round brass bell that adorned the harness of his horse. And once they arrived in Trinidad, they were assigned to the Picton Sugar Estate in South Central Trinidad. Sabsu died within 2 years of his arrival in Trinidad, and his body was consigned to an unmarked grave somewhere on the plantation. Ganassi worked out the term of her indentureship, and she kept the tin canister with the residential papers that released her from her duties. These artifacts, along with one side of her earring and the brass bell, are still in the possession of her family. That's all we have left. This is a picture of the earring that she wore that came, I only have the one side that came from India with her. Young Laltu was then a boy of just 5 years of age, and he came under the tutelage of the Canadian Presbyterian Mission, moving quickly up the ladder academically and socially due to a sound education. He eventually converted to Christianity and was assigned the first name of Henry, retaining his only name, Laltu, as a surname. He went on to train as a teacher at Naparima College under Dr. Kenneth Grant of Canada, and went on to attend St. Andrew's Theological College in San Fernando, where he was among the first groups of graduates to become ordained as a minister in 1915. And that was the year my father was born. Reverend Henry then went on to father 12 children, many of whom went on to contribute greatly to Trinidad in the fields of education, medicine, and enterprise before immigrating overseas to England, Canada, and the United States. Today, their descendants number in the hundreds, all highly educated and living lives far removed from those of their Indian forebears in both Trinidad and India. In 2008, one of Henry's descendants, his great-granddaughter and my daughter Alexandra Ferguson, took a trip to India under the auspices of the Habitat for Humanity to help build houses for the locals in a small village near the city of Chennai. Here she enjoyed the local customs and foods, even drinking water from a coconut, just like a real Trini. Once the houses were completed, they traveled with the fellow builders to Jaipur in the state of Rajasthan and visited the nearby city of New Delhi, taking in the Red Fort, the Palace of Winds, the Taj Mahal, various attractions that showcase the rich culture, beauty, history, and vibrancy of India's storied past. She was the first member of our family to make the journey back to India 107 years after our family left the shores for Trinidad. In her, some of the DNA that left these shores was returned to from whence it came. I have a small addition to that story in the form of a poem. My daughter arrived in India today. India, that mystery, that womb from whence we came. The diaspora across the Kalapani, never to return. Leaving familiar villages and towns to cross an ocean nearly 200 years ago, leaving behind that separate reality. India, so distant, yet ever present in our DNA. We've all dreamed of India, her imprint deeply buried in our collective psyche, carried in our imaginations. Not unlike that mythic place we all come from at birth, our whole lives but a circle path back to it, like my daughter's arrival in India today. That was April the 26th, 2008. Thank you.
Now we have a talk hymn. So we have a hymn of the glorious body telling, which will be told by Jason Mirage this evening. Good evening, Jason.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And there you are. Hi, Jason.
Hi, hello.
You go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Of the glorious body telling. Of the glorious body telling, O my tongue, its mysteries sing, and the blood all prize excelling, which the world's internal king, in a noble womb once dwelling, shed for this world's ransoming, giving for us descending of a virgin to proceed, man with man in converse blending, scattered he the gospel seed, till his sojourn drew to ending, which he closed in wondrous deed. At the last great supper line, circled by his chosen band, duly with the law complying, first he finished its command, then immortal food supplying, gave himself by his own hand. Word made flesh, by word he maketh, bread his very flesh to be. Man in wine Christ's blood partaketh, and if senses fail to see, faith alone the true heart waketh, to behold the mystery. Part 2. Tantum ergo. Therefore we, before him bending, this great sacrament revere. Types and shadows have their ending, for the newer rite is here. Faith, our outward sense befriending, makes the inward vision clear. Glory let us give and blessing to the Father and the Son, honor, might, and praise addressing, while eternal ages run, ever to his love confessing, who from both with both is one. Amen.
And first up for us this evening, we have a poem by Ella Wheeler Wilcox, which was found on www.yourdailypoem.com, and it will be read by Auntie Natasha. Let me show you all Auntie Natasha this evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Hi. Good to be here.
Yes.
Good to be here.
And
All
after
right.
Auntie Natasha reads, we're going to hear our song from last episode, which was Oh My Papa, being played by Errol Ince. So after Auntie Natasha reads, we're going to hear that song by Errol Ince. Go ahead, Auntie Natasha.
Okay. Father by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. He never made a fortune or noise in the world where men are seeking after fame. But he had a healthy brood of girls and boys who loved the very ground on which he trod. They thought him just little short of God. Oh, you should have heard the way they said his name. Father. There seemed to be a loving little prayer in their voices, even when they called him Dad. Though the man was never heard of anywhere as a hero, yet somehow understood he was doing well his part and making good. And you knew it by the way his children had of saying, Father. He gave them neither eminence nor wealth, but he gave them blood untainted with vice and opulence of undiluted health. He was honest and unapproachable and kind. He was clean in heart and body and in mind. So he made them heirs to riches without price. This father, he never preached or scolded or rod. Well, he used it as a turning pole in play. But he showed the tender sympathy of God to his children in their troubles and in their joys. He was always chum and comrade with his boys, and his daughters, oh, you ought to hear them say, Father. Now, I think of all achievements, 'tis the least. To perpetuate the species, it's done by insect and the serpent and the beast. But the man who keeps his body and his thought worth bestowing on an offspring love begot, then the highest earthly glory he was won, when in pride a grown-up daughter or son that says, "That's father."
Coming up now, we have the factoid on Elma Francois, written by Wilkes and found on triniView.com. And this factoid is going to be read by Natasha Greer.
Hi,
Good evening.
hi. Yes, one of the ladies now of the movement. We've heard about the guys. Now we're hearing about one of the foremost ladies of the movement. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Elma Francois, 1897 to 1944, by Corey Jilks, and taken from triniView.com. October 14th marked the birth of one of the most vociferous Afrocentric activists in the history of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. She is Elma Constance Francois. In the study of the struggle of African people on the continent and in the diaspora to free themselves from the European and Arab domination and to redefine their existence, the women who were the standard bearers of those struggles are often given less attention than their male counterparts. Even when they were acknowledged, the names of Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Angela Davis are the names spoken. Elma and her contemporaries give lie to the myths about the meek acceptance of colonialism by the colonized and to the lack of political and social consciousness among women. Elma Francois was born in Overland, St. Vincent. In her youth, she received primary education up to the 5th standard, and she worked alongside her mother picking cotton. From an early age, she struggles for the betterment of her people, since life in St. Vincent was very hard for laborers, especially women. Some could work picking cotton chaff and separate the seeds, for which they would receive 12 to 14 cents a day. Others worked as domestic servants, while others worked at the Mount Bentic sugar factory producing syrup or sweetening. The outspoken Elma quickly set about trying to organize the laborers of Mount Bentic sugar factory, where she worked. Of course, she was fired. In 1917, her son Conrad was born. In 1919, however, she was forced to leave him in the care of his grandmother, for she was migrating to Trinidad, where there were better opportunities. There, she first found work as a domestic servant. Not surprisingly, she joined the Trinidad Working Men's Association under Captain A.A. Cipriani. Cipriani, a former West India Regiment soldier, served in World War I, and in spite of his ancestry, was aware of the racism and squalid conditions of the working class in Trinidad. He sympathized with their plight and came to call himself the champion of the barefoot man. He continued this after the war, and in 1923 was asked to assume leadership of the TWA, which functioned as a trade union. Cipriani reorganized the TWA into a political party, a wise move, since two rights conferred upon trade unions by Britain by the Act of 1906, the right to peaceful picketing and protection against actions in tort, were not extended to unions in the Caribbean and Africa. Unlike other women members, Francois did not restrict herself to political activity as defined by the TWE. The outspoken and confrontational Elma certainly did not fit the mold of the Western or Afro-Saxon woman, and her personality inevitably clashed with that of Cipriani. Cipriani, though a supporter of workers' rights, favored non-confrontational action. His outlook was also colored by the fact that his class position as a landowner from the propertied Catholic French Creole class often presented a serious conflict of interest. Also, he almost completely accepted the British Labour Party's brand of labour and socialism, and his adherence to their policies and priorities as a yardstick by which he measured progress in Trinidad and Tobago. On the other hand, Francois preferred direct action through the workers, not employers. She clashed with him on the question of May Day, which she felt should be declared a public holiday. She was an avid reader, very conscious about her African heritage, and loved nothing better than to engage people in debates. She was also one of the few people with the courage to challenge the church and the authority of the Bible. Elma spoke in Woodford Square, an open-air park in Port of Spain, where to this day people gather to argue social, religious, and political views, on street corners, in various towns. This is how she met Jim Headley, who, together with Francois, became a founding member of the Negro Welfare Cultural and Social Association, the NWCSA. The Marxist-oriented NWCSA, though it was committed to the empowerment of people of African descent, also had Indian and Chinese members. Also, from its inception, it set out to attract women. Hence the inclusion of the words cultural and social, as these were areas of work in which it was felt women could initially be most easily incorporated. The organization took the position that women and men should cooperate in the development of their collective political consciousnesses. There was no separation of women into women's arms and auxiliaries. And within the organization, executive positions changed regularly so that these responsibilities were shared equally. Elma usually, however, retained the position of organizing secretary. The NWCSA organized the unemployed and celebrated Emancipation Day. They lobbied for small traders. Their hunger marches provided the impetus for the Sugar Workers' Hunger March of 1934 and the 1935 Hunger March of another radical thinking leader, T.U.B. Butler. The NWCSA was responsible for galvanizing the national response against the Italian invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. The outcry was so great that many dock workers refused to unload Italian ships. The NWCSA was responsible for the formation of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union and the Federated Workers Trade Union. During the famous Butler riots of 1937, the NWCSA mobilized support for the striking oil workers, held meetings in the North and the turbulent South Trinidad, partly under the auspices of Butler's party, the British Empire Workers and Citizens Home Rule Party, And all this was done in spite of the harassment by police and their attempts to infiltrate the party's meetings. The NWCSA also circulated false reports regarding Butler's whereabouts when he was in hiding. Elma was eventually arrested. She became the first woman in Trinidad's history to be tried for sedition. She defended herself and was found not guilty. In 1944, Elma Francois died. The result, some say, of a broken heart after her son Conrad joined the army to fight a war in which she bitterly opposed the Black involvement. She, along with fellow party members Jim Barrett, Clement Payne, had publicly disagreed with the showing of solidarity to the British Crown on the grounds that the Western Allies had allowed the rise of Hitler as a counter to Stalin in the Soviet Union. It was only when Hitler turned on them that they mobilized militarily to defend themselves and in the process drew in colonials, whom they otherwise discriminated against racially, to fight and die for them in their war. There was certainly a strong thread of anti-British sentiment at first. Several leading calypsonians, folk singers, sang against the war, and in his autobiography, Through a Maze of Color, Albert Gomes noted that cinema crowds cheered when film clips showed the British being defeated by Nazi forces. However, by 1940, colonial propaganda, plus the withholding of the report of the Moyne Commission, which investigated the cause of labor riots in the Caribbean, had intensified to the point where loyalty to the crown became the dominant outlook on the war. Francois was understandably crushed when she learned about Conrad's decision to enlist. She regarded his decision to enlist as a personal failure on her part. On September 25, 1987, Elma Francois was declared a national heroine of Trinidad and Tobago. And this article was written by Mr. Corey Jilks and was sourced from triniview.com.
Our first story this evening will be read by Jason Mirage, and this story is about Quevedo, Raymond Quevedo, also known as Attila the Hun. And here we are going to hear about Attila the Hun. Hi, Jason.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Raymond Quevedo, 24th of March, 1892 to 22nd of February, 1962, better known as Attila the Hun, sang his first calypso publicly in 1911 as a chantwell lead singer for a carnival band in Port of Spain. He was leading Trinidad calypsonian for almost half a century, being at his most prominent in the 1930s and 1940s, where he sang at the original Old Brigade tent. He was one of the pioneers in spreading awareness of calypso beyond its birthplace in TNT. Together with the Roaring Lion, Rafael de Leon, he brought calypso to the United States for the first time in March 1934, when Eduardo Sa Gomez, the Trinidad agent for Brunswick Records, sent Lion and Attila to record calypsos in New York. This arrangement was one of the defining moments in calypso history. While Lionel Belasco, Wilmot Houdini, and others had recorded calypsos abroad before, this was the first time that locally based calypsonians traveled to New York on contract to record. Attila and Lyon's recording session was successful and proved to be the start of a 10-year annual flow of Calypsonians to the US. While in New York City, Lyon and Attila also appeared on the Rudy Valise Fleischman's Variety Hour radio show on WEEF on March 8, 1934. That was heard, though just barely and with great static, on shortwave in Trinidad. The singers also appeared as part of the floor show at Valleys Hollywood Cafe on Broadway in Manhattan and performed for President Roosevelt at the charity function at the Waldorf Astoria. In 1935, Attila formed the Kiskidi Trio along with Tiger and Lord Beginner, and they recorded Congo Barra, Duke and Duchess of Kent, accompanied by Gerald Clark and his Caribbean Serenaders. They also recorded the ever-popular Don't Let My Mother Know. One of Attila's popular calypsos was FDR in Trinidad, commemorating US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 1936 trip to Trinidad. Attila competed in the first Calypso King contest in 1939 and won. He won the title in both 1946 and 1947. When several of his records were censored, he composed The Banning of Records, which was itself banned. The melody of Attila's Calypso Behind the Wall was popularized by American singer Harry Belafonte, who recorded it as Jump in the Line. Known as a defender of the poor, Attila was able to transition to a political career. As the first Calypsonian to hold elected public office, he became an elected member of the Port of Spain City Council in 1946 and deputy mayor. He later became President General of the Trinidad Labour Party and served on the Carnival Improvement Committee, the Railway Board, and other civic organizations. In 1950, he was elected to the Legislative Council of Trinidad and Tobago, representing the St. George County East. Attila the Hun died in 1962 at the age of 69. He was posthumously awarded the Public Service Medal of Merit in 1972. Attila's Kaiso, A Short History of Trinidad Calypso with John LaRose, which he completed in the mid-50s, was published posthumously in 1983 via the University of the West Indies School of Continuing Students and with the financial support of L.J. Williams and Company Limited, according to an excerpt from the book's foreword by Errol Hill. It is appropriate that Attila's book should be sponsored by L.J. Williams Limited in his history. Attila refers to a Trinidad merchant who, in 1929, sponsored one of the first tents run by a syndicate of Calypsonians. In return, the tent used as its theme song a catchy chorus advertising one of the products of the sponsor's products, a chocolate milk drink called Toddy. The merchant was none other than Mr. Louise J. Williams, and Attila's advertising calypso became one of the road marches of the season. Such enlightened businesses' dealings at the interest of both the sponsor and the national culture have continued through the years to be a policy of this firm. The end.
Now we're going to move on to Cuba. So this reading is going to be done by Auntie Natasha, and it's a poem called Cup with Wings. It's translated from Spanish, and it's by Jose Marti, found on allpoetry.com. Good evening, Auntie Natasha.
Good evening, Nerissa. How are you?
I am good this evening.
Glad to be taking this journey around the Caribbean with you guys.
Yes, yes, wonderful. So let's hear about a cup with wings.
Cup with Wings by Jose Marti. A cup with wings. Who's seen it before me? I saw her yesterday, went up with slow majesty as one who pours sacred oil. Already its sweet edges my gifted lips pressed. Not even a drop, Not a drop I lost the balm that was in your kiss. Your head of black hair, do you remember? With my hand I required, because your generous lips from me, they will not depart. Soft as the kiss that transfused me, it was the soft atmosphere in Rideau. The whole life I felt that hugging. I lost the world of sight and its noises and his envious and barbaric battle. A glass in the air was raising, and I, in unseen arms reclining behind her, clinging to her sweet edges. Through the blue space, I was going back. Oh love, oh immense, oh finished artist, the blacksmith casts iron on a wheel or rail, a flower or woman or eagle or angel, in gold or silver, the jeweler chisels. You, only, only you know the way to reduce the universe to a kiss. By Jose
Oh
Marti.
my.